Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we get to talk about quarterbacks, so I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Anytime you can talk about quarterbacks, obviously that's the only thing you need to talk about in college football. If you have a returning quarterback, returning starter, national championship or bust, if you're breaking in somebody new, all hope is lost, except for, Tom, Ohio State. As we know, every time they've won a legitimate national title, it has been with a new starting quarterback than the previous year. So, Ohio State will have a new starting quarterback than they did this year, Tom, in 2024. So, I don't care about anything else. I think I have just essentially guaranteed Ohio State will win the national championship. Although my logic is a little bit faulty because Kyle McCord was also not a returning starter. However, he did have that start in 2021, so I think my logic holds firm.
This may be one of those not all rectangles are squares, but all squares are rectangles kinds of things. We can. I'm hoping if we dumb it down to shapes, that will be simple enough to have you wrap your head around. But we'll see. I mean, it's possible. They didn't win the national championship in 2021 either when CJ Stroud was his first time starter. So, Tony, that can only mean one thing. They're due.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Michigan cheated.
When
two things.
When would I ever say that, Tony?
So we do need to talk about the quarterback situation at Ohio State and Kyle McCord choosing to hit the portal and waking everybody up on Monday morning and putting everybody into a state of, holy cow, this is legitimately happening now, and this is the world we live in when Ohio State can lose the starting quarterback. I do still wonder if it's possible for them to lose like a CJ Stroud or a Justin Fields to the portal, somebody that they're going to do everything they can to keep. And is this a situation where they could have done more to keep Kyle McCord, do you think?
Well, they could have done more. My understanding of the situation from what I've been told is that Kyle McCord and his camp were looking for assurances that Kyle McCord would once again be the starter for Ohio State in 2024. And they were not given those assurances. And, I think that's probably reflective of the fact that, hey, the level of play from the quarterback position was not where it needed to be to get Ohio State to its three goals, which are beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. Kyle McCord was fine. He was solid. He was, I think everyone online is grading him as like an F minus. And it's like, no, he was fine, but he wasn't up to the recent standard that's been established from Ohio State quarterbacks where, CJ Stroud didn't win the national championship, but that had a lot more to do with the Ohio State defenses than it did with the Ohio State offense. And you could say the same thing with Justin Fields, especially in 2020. So I think that, Kyle McCord was not at the level where he needed to be for them to feel comfortable where there was not going to be a quarterback battle the next spring. CJ Stroud was there in 2021. Going into 2022, McCord was not there. So McCord was looking for assurances that he would be a starter. He was not given those. He was looking for, they were looking for some assurances in terms of, hey, how about some, NIL to, give me, a little insurance, backup in case, I'm not the starter so that you're not walking away with nothing. And that was not something that the folks who were in charge of such things were willing to do either. And so Kyle McCord's in the portal and he's going to land somewhere. And, the places that we talked about on the, instant reaction show are very much sort of in line with the level of places that you're hearing about him now. It's, we talked about how Nebraska would be an interesting fit. And I've seen Nebraska mentioned. I think North Carolina State was one of the places that I saw mentioned. He's not going to Georgia. He's not going to Alabama, but he's also not going to Akron. He's good. He's probably going to get a really nice fat NIL deal, but he's not going to go be the next Bo Nix or the next Stetson Bennett or whoever, where, you're Michael Penix, where you're going to be, on the Heisman show and, potentially leading your team to the college football playoff and the national championship. So I think there's been a lot of discourse around like, what does this mean? And I think, Tony, it means that Kyle McCord was a very good quarterback and was deemed the best available option for Ohio State in 2023. Thus, he was the starting quarterback in 2023. But the available options, even the best one, were not good enough to get them to where they need to be. So either the remaining options, Devin Brown and Lincoln Kienholz, need to improve, which they should over the next spring and summer to get to that level, or they need to look at the portal to try and find someone who is at that level because they have goals to reach and they don't have another year to sit around and cross their fingers and hope.
I do wonder whether it was the chicken or the egg here, because I do believe Ohio State is looking at the portal for a quarterback. And I don't know how Ryan Day on Sunday said they're probably not going to be looking at a quarterback in the portal. And then the following day, Kyle McCord leaves, and now you're going to have to go look for a quarterback in the portal either at the front of the line or the back of the line so that they can get their fourth guy. And so is it going to be a starter that they're looking for or another Tristan Gebbia? And if you're shopping, you may as well look at the top shelf stuff and see what's out there and see what is going on. But also doing that, I think if you bring in a one-year guy, and I think if they do go to the portal, it's a one-year guy, you're saying goodbye to Devin Brown. And at this point, I don't think you can operate in a way of like, boy, I don't want to scare anybody off. You don't want to scare Devin Brown off. I don't think they want to scare Lincoln Kienholz off. That's why you go with a one-year guy. But Devin Brown on, Wednesday tweeted out painting of the burning the boats, basically saying no turning back, only forward. Now, does that mean only forward for the Cotton Bowl? We'll see, and what happens after that. But in terms of the portal, like there are some good guys out there. I think maybe the top three guys would be Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma, Riley Leonard from Duke, Cam Ward from Washington State, and right now there is the most smoke around Cam Ward and Ohio State. And here's a 2-year starter. It's a pretty interesting story. A 2-year starter at Washington State, a 2-year starter at Incarnate Word. It came from like an option wing T high school offense, and first year at Incarnate Word in a 6-game FCS spring season, because this was 2020, threw for like 2,400 yards and like 25 touchdowns, and was I think the Jerry Rice Award winner, like the top freshman in FCS. And then as a sophomore was a finalist for the Walter Payton FCS Heisman, essentially. And then goes to Washington State and puts up some good numbers in 2 years there. And I think as Dylan Gabriel, is there some Oregon buzz there? Riley Leonard, I think everybody has always expected to end up at Notre Dame. And from what I've been told, and again, I want to be clear, I'm not reporting this, but from what I've been told from people in the industry who are dealing with the NIL and the quarterback world, over the last couple of days, if you're asking them to pick a place where Cam Ward is going to end up, it's Ohio State. And a couple of days ago, I got a list of here's where things are leaning now for like 5 or 6 or 8 different quarterbacks. And then I got another list, the same list on Wednesday. And there are some changes in there, but one of the constants was Cam Ward and Ohio State. And again, I think if you go get Cam Ward, Tom, you're saying goodbye to Devin Brown, but you're also saying hello to a guy who would be entering essentially his 5th year as a college starting quarterback.
Yeah, you're bringing in someone who has never played at the level that Ohio State plays at, but he's played, against some really good competition. He playing at Washington State, your talent around you, your offensive line, your skill talent is not the level of the Ohio State talent. But they played Washington, they played Oregon this year. They even played Wisconsin this year. So, they have played Big Ten teams, and he's not an absolute surefire thing. But depending on what they're looking for, they may perceive him as a more sure thing than Devin Brown. And I talked to Ross Fulton a bunch about the quarterback position sort of more broadly, and, Cam Ward and, some of the other potential targets sort of in particular on the episode of Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning that dropped on Wednesday afternoon. So if you want to hear Ross talk about that, you can find that wherever fine podcasts are sold or at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. But I think Cam Ward is someone that Ross thinks would maybe bring some things to the Ohio State offense that they were missing with Kyle McCord. He is not perfect. He is not, the absolute surefire. This guy is definitely going to be standing at the Heisman ceremony next year if he comes to Ohio State. He could, but he also brings just some of the things that were missing last year with just the lack of mobility from McCord, where you didn't have guys extending plays with their legs. You didn't, the offensive line was sort of shaky, and when the offensive line was sort of shaky, Kyle McCord would sometimes be able to step up and pick up 2 yards, but you never saw him step up and pick up 15 yards, or, you didn't see him roll right and extend plays and, give receivers time to kind of get open on the scramble drill. Sometimes, but not nearly as often as you see that with Ward. So I think, Tony, I went through and watched the all 22 of Oregon's game against Washington State. So this is one of the best defenses he played, and he was just under attack all day, just constantly under pressure. And he reminded me a lot of J.J. McCarthy. And I think people are going to look at that and go, the stats are so much better than J.J. McCarthy. I'm not talking about like stats. I'm talking about just, you watch his game. He sort of, makes a guy miss in the pocket, extend, pressure coming to the middle. Okay, he'll roll out to the right. There was a play where he rolled out to the right real late, and there was just sort of a back who had just sort of leaked out in the middle. It was kind of towards the end of the game. Leaked out in the middle and just was sort of like wide open, standing there, just arm-wavingly wide open, and just zipped it into him. Boom. A play that looked like it might be a disaster 2 seconds ago turns into a 25-yard gain or whatever it was. Real impressive yardage numbers. He threw 1 touchdown on the game, and it was in the final minute of the game when they were down 38-16, something like that. This is one of these things where it's hard to project him in a different offense. Washington State, they might have run the ball 8 times, on actual called running back kind of runs in that game. It's a very different offense from what Ohio State runs. It's a different skill level than Ohio State has. You don't know exactly how he's going to translate to the Ryan Day system, and it's probably a more complicated passing offense. But you look at it and it's like, I could see this. And at this point, I feel like I'm kind of waiting for Ryan Day, who has seen a lot more Devin Brown than I have, and Ryan Day, who knows a lot more about specifics of what he's looking for in terms of a quarterback in the portal. If Ryan Day kind of points and says, yes, you and the NIL stuff all works out, yeah, I could see it. It's going to be a different looking Ohio State offense, but I could certainly see it working.
Well, and he's mobile in that he can escape pressure, and he still looks to throw the ball down the field. I was scrolling Twitter, and I saw a play against USC where he's escaping 4 sacks, and he's rolling right and then throwing back across his body into the middle of the field for a completion. And there is a lot of that. And I wonder, can you just stand in the pocket and throw the ball? If you've got time, can you boom, boom, boom? Or is this something where he just prefers to be on the move? J.J. McCarthy is really good on the move, and I think he likes being on the move. Some guys just like doing that. And how much of the offense do you have to change for that? How much of the what is the process of marrying a new quarterback that just comes in to your offense, and how quickly can somebody pick that up? And we saw Justin Fields come in with really no competition. And if it's just let's just say that Cam Ward is coming to Ohio State, and if that happens again, I believe then Devin Brown is gone. And I know we don't like projecting transfers on this show at this point anymore. That's just part of the college football world, especially at quarterback. But is the competition that much different than it would have been in 2019? So you'd have a pretty good chance of winning the job. And obviously you're bringing them in to win the job, but he has to be able to process all of this and learn all of this quickly. And you would think he probably can, because again, he's a 4-year starter in college football. Sure, 2 years of those were FCS, but this is something that's going to have to be a question that they ask of any of these guys that they're looking at. Look at over at Washington with Michael Penix. You talk about projecting. There's no way I was projecting him to do what he did at Washington based on what we saw of him at Indiana. So give Kalen DeBoer tons of kudos for that one. And now we'll see who they go get now. And whoever Washington gets, Ohio State is probably going to be like, shoot, that was the guy we were supposed to get. Because I don't think Washington's going to go and get Cam Ward. But then, Tom, the other question for me is, of all of these quarterbacks in the portal, I think a lot of them can lead Ohio State to an 11-1 regular season. But that's not good enough. So you got to find a guy that can go beyond that.
Well, is it good enough next year? Because next year is not this year. 11-1 is good enough next year. 11-1 gets you into the playoff, and then, what happens after that? The game doesn't change, son. That's sort of the reality of next year. Now, to your actual point, is there someone in the portal that is such a materially better quarterback who is available to Ohio State that they could get, that is so much better than Kyle McCord was in the previous year? Not that he's an option, but that's sort of the benchmark, and you've got to clear the benchmark. So is there someone that's that much better than that who's out there? Because I don't know where to think that Devin Brown is as compared to where Kyle McCord was. Was Devin Brown was very clearly not judged to be 100% of Kyle McCord, because if he was, he would have gotten a lot more run during the course of the season. So was he 90% of Kyle McCord? Was he 85% of Kyle McCord? And how much is he going to improve going into his third season and, potentially getting the first team reps this month and in the spring and all that kind of stuff? I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know that I see a quarterback. I see lots of quarterbacks, at least the three we talked about, and, others whose names have sort of gotten thrown out there that are not in the portal yet. There are a handful of guys who I could see being good enough to lead Ohio State to a, 11-1, 12-0 type regular season. And, winning the Big Ten championship game gets a lot harder next year, because you no longer just get the, whoever crappy team from the West. You might have to beat Michigan 2 weeks in a row. You might have to beat Penn State. You might have to beat Oregon or Washington. You might have to beat USC. These are all possibilities next year in the Big Ten championship game. I certainly think that Ohio State's going to be a college football playoff team regardless of who they have. And I think you're probably, if I just tell you Ohio State gets one of the top 3 guys who we talked about, and I think, probably 2 of them are not really super likely to come to Ohio State, but, Ohio State gets one of the 3 top quarterbacks that you talked about earlier: Riley Leonard, Dylan Gabriel, Cam Ward. Are any of them, do you look at any of them and say Ohio State won't be a college football playoff team, or Ohio State is virtually a lock to go 12-0 next year? I don't know that I see either of those as, I think Ohio State's probably more likely to be a national championship kind of caliber team, probably because you have a maybe higher floor there than you do with the existing people, but I don't know that I see an absolutely sure thing there.
I see the playoffs occurring regardless of whether they go into the portal or not. It's just, you should be making the playoffs if you're Ohio State. You should be one of the, I guess, would need to be top 10 teams to avoid the group of 5 and any other kind of shenanigans that go on. So if you want to be one of those at-larges, you're going to have to be up in there. But they generally are, and you'd think there'd be enough talent around whichever quarterback there is to create a learning curve. But if you throw me one of those 3 quarterbacks, I'm feeling pretty good about my chances, because you're bringing in established guys. And I think maybe more than anything that I'm looking forward to seeing, whether it's Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholz, or somebody from the portal, more playmaking from the position. I think you're going to need that because you don't have Marvin Harrison anymore, and Ohio State will have some really good receivers, but you can't he's not going to be there anymore unless he shocks the world when we talk to him on Thursday and say, yeah, I'm coming back. I'm not expecting that. So having a guy that can make more plays would be, I think, good for the offense as a whole, but just understand that whoever is making those plays will probably make some mistakes along the way. And you've got to be able to overcome that. And Ohio State generally can overcome some quarterback mistakes, especially if you get more plays out of them, more big plays out of them. So then it just becomes a matter of what's it going to cost. The numbers that I was told in terms of Cam Ward is $2 to $2.5 million, which if this is a salary cap thing and it's not, but the money isn't infinite, would you be better served spending that money on, if you could get, here are two names that are in the portal on Wednesday. Chase Basantis, starting right tackle for Texas A&M, started all 12 games this year as a true freshman. And Walter Nolan, defensive tackle from Texas A&M. Like, if you could get those two guys for $2.5 million, I think that is a better investment than a quarterback, but it might be more of an investment in the future than the immediacy, even though it would also be immediate. I feel pretty good about Lincoln Keenholz, but I don't know if he's ready not right now, but this season. I think if you gave him a chance, you're only going to see him get better. And by the time you hit November, December, he's no longer a redshirt freshman. He is an established Big Ten starter. And then that just sets you off even more for 2025. So, it is a win now thing for Ohio State because of the situation that they're in. But I'm not convinced they couldn't win without the guys they have.
I think you could probably win reasonably well with Lincoln Keenholz in 2024. And that this is really just based on what we're hearing, what we're being told. The way people talk about Lincoln Keenholz is different than the way they talked about Kyle McCord or the way they talk about Devin Brown. Now, that's a down the road thing. Lincoln Keenholz was not ready to play this year. We'll see how ready he is to play on September 1st, and then on November 1st, and then on December 1st next year. That may be a little bit of a learning curve season, and I guess your margin for error is a little bigger than it has been in the past. But the problem with, I guess the issue that I would see with having Lincoln Keenholz being your starter in 2024 is, we talked about if you bring in a portal guy, Devin Brown leaves. If you're starting the guy who's a year behind Devin Brown also leaves. Mm-hmm. And so then you've got Lincoln Keenholz and you've got Aaron Noland and you've got whichever Chris Chuganoff 2.0 guys you bring in, or Tristan Gebbia 2.0 guys you bring in, and your margin for error there is kind of thin. I do agree with your point that if you can bring in a really top interior defensive lineman and a really top tackle, that probably materially increases your chances of being pretty darn good in 2024 as well. Can they bring in Carter Smith, who is a Central Ohio native, and does he move the needle enough to, you shuffle some guys around? And then, on Thursday, they're supposed to be hearing from Jordan Seaton, who is a 5-star tackle, that he's supposed to be making his, announcing his commitment, and then we'll all find out on the 20th whether the place he announces on the 7th is the place he's actually going. Does bringing in a tackle now impact your Jordan Seaton, your ability to have Jordan Seaton come in? There's a lot of moving parts here. I think there are multiple paths to a very, very good 2024 Ohio State team, and maybe that involves bringing in a transfer quarterback, a one-year transfer that then does, as you said, sort of set you up with Lincoln Keenholz for 2025. Because I do think there's a very, very, the thing that I would be most confident in right now is Lincoln Keenholz is the Ohio State starting quarterback in 2025. I feel more confident in that than I do in naming whoever the starting quarterback in 2024, because I think there's a lot of different possibilities. Just the way they talk about him, the way, it just feels like that's going to be what it is. this is kind of a you got to win year for Ryan Day. I don't think you can go 0 for 3 on your goals again for the 4th straight year and, not start feeling a little bit of heat. So they've got to do what they've got to do to win in 2024. I think there's a couple different ways, a couple different things we've talked about here that could get them there. And it's just kind of a matter of how do you want to allocate your resources and what do you want to prioritize?
And what is the highest ceiling? And I'm assuming that would be with a transfer guy. And the thing is, yes, Lincoln Keenholz is going to get better throughout the season. Devin Brown is going to get better throughout the season. So is that transfer quarterback. The more they play in Ohio State's system, the more they work with the Ohio State wide receivers, the better they're going to get. And they're starting at on a higher floor than the other guys in terms of their experience. And, that's not a bad place to be for Ryan Day. I do, there has been some buzz that, the collectives for Ohio State aren't getting the job done and that the big money donors don't really want to go through the collectives. They just want to be able to provide funds like they always have, Tom. And my suggestion on Twitter on Wednesday was to do what schools have done with head coaches and assistant coaches and ADs and have a sponsor. And so you could have somebody sponsor, I'm going to throw $2.5 million into the pot, but I want my name, like Mitch and Shirley Sherman, starting quarterback Cam Ward. Like I want my name on this NIL guy, and I also want the name on the back of the jersey. So that is, as we get into this wild world of what is next for NIL and college football, like at some point you're going to have to spend some money, and the way these college quarterbacks are getting paid, then it's going to have to come from somewhere, and you can't just keep investing in quarterbacks because there are other positions. And if it's going to become an interesting, it's already interesting on how you handle this, how you build it, how you tear it down, and how you keep it. Because not only do you have to go find guys, you have to keep your own guys. And we saw Jermaine Matthews tweet out a picture of a money bag the other day, and it's like, oh, is Jermaine Matthews transferring? And it's like, no, I think he's just letting people know that I'm here too. And there are plenty of people, I'm sure there are plenty of people that would love to have him. And the back channels for every single player in the nation and every single school in the nation is wide open right now.
Absolutely. I think everyone, you can't just throw all of your NIL money, not that there's any sort of organized, yada, yada, yada. All right, got that out of the way. You can't throw all of your NIL money at the new guys because you got to keep the existing guys. I mean, Ryan Day talked, a year ago, something like that, about needing, $12 million a year just to kind of keep your existing team together. There are guys who, some of the numbers are a little fanciful, let's say. I think Jordan Addison was going to USC, and every time someone talked about how much money Jordan Addison was getting from USC, the number went up by about $500,000. It was $3.5 million to $4 million to $24.5 million to $25 million for Jordan Addison. It just kept going up and up and up. Some of the numbers are a little fanciful, but there are people who are willing to, if you go into the portal, this is the Kyle McCord thing we talked about earlier. If you can't get the starting job guarantee and whatever size check you're looking for at Ohio State, well, someone else is going to give it to you because someone else is looking for someone just like you. And, the grass is always greener and everyone is always an upgrade. And here's the thing. Ohio State had a very, very good team last year, which means Ohio State had a bunch of very, very good players. So Ohio State is looking at Jermaine Matthews as potentially a starting cornerback with 2 years of starting experience left for 2024. Guess what? That's going to be a player that other teams are also looking for. Davis Igbinosun came over in the portal last year from Ole Miss with 2 years remaining as a, freshman All-American. I'm going to guess Davis Igbinosun did not just do that for scholarship money. He probably did okay with NIL stuff as well. The market right now is such that there is enough demand that if you are a talented player, there is a market out there, and that this is the brave new world of college football. And I know a lot of people find it distasteful, but it is what it is. And this is sort of all a direct result of the folks in charge of the sport acting like this whole thing was just utterly impossible for decades and decades and decades. And then it was sort of thrust on them and they're like, oh no, we were about to change. Like, no, you weren't. You had decades and decades to change this and you chose not to. So now it gets changed in a way that you don't have any say in. So it is a brave new world. It is certainly a time that I feel like all of the recruiting speculation and crystal balls and all that kind of stuff, everyone's a little less certain. There's a lot of guys out there where there's no crystal balled out on people who are committing like 24 hours in the future because no one really knows because it's going to be up to, it's going to be up to NIL stuff and off-field stuff in some cases. It's all gotten very unpredictable and, is that for the better? Is that for the worse? Probably depends on who you ask, but it is certainly gotten, as I said, more unpredictable.
There you have it all. More unpredictable, just as we have predicted. So that will do it for this episode. If you want to go ahead and like this video, if you haven't already, we would greatly appreciate that. Follow us over at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Of course, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. Become a member there. There's a lot going on. The season is almost over, and it is feeling like the 2024 season is just about to begin. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.